Welcome in. Hail to the podcast brought to you by Maize and Blue Review. We are part of the Rivals Network. Sorry, flustered tonight. We'll get into it. Part of the Rivals Network covering Michigan sports over at michigan.rivals.com. Busy show tonight. We're going to talk about the winter sports season for Michigan, the second half of Michigan football. Hockey has dropped the puck on a couple games, and basketball is right around the corner. So we're going to kind of just talk about state of the union, state of the program, those three, and expectations heading into the season. For tonight's show, I will be joined by Brock Heilig, our guy when it comes to pretty much all things sports like that. He's going to be our preview master. Excited to dive into it. But obviously have to start with some devastating news. Those of you watching back on playback here, we are live a little after 7 on Sunday. The Detroit Lions are currently playing the Dallas Cowboys, and Aiden Hutchinson has suffered a brutal, devastating leg injury, broken leg. No doctor, but that definitely looks like fibula and tibula probably. His season will be over, and it is just devastating for a guy who, this is the second time he has completely helped turn around the culture of a program. 2020 at Michigan, he had a broken leg as well. A lot thought he would go straight to the NFL with the turmoil that was happening at Michigan and the coaching changes and all of that. And not only does he stay and become a captain and become kind of the megaphone for the Beat Ohio State movement and everything that set in motion the culture change of success, not only in 21, but into 22 and 23 and the eventual national championship. Leading sack getter, arguably the second best defensive season in Michigan history, right behind Charles Woodson. Obviously, he finished second Heisman as well. Goes to Detroit, stays home, and has been just absolutely instrumental in the Lions rebuild. They're Super Bowl hopefuls with him. He was probably the defensive MVP favorite at this point. I don't mean to make it sound like a eulogy, but it's just hard to imagine a lot of guys bigger or more loved in the city of Detroit right now than Hutchinson. Obviously, all the best wishes to him. You hope it's, frankly, just the leg break and a quick recovery. But Brock, man, this is heavy. I can't remember the last time having a player like this go down in a moment like this. Just devastating.
It really is devastating, demoralizing, whatever adjective you want to describe. Whatever adjective you want to use to describe it, it's what it is, and it's terrible. You brought it up, Hutchinson being at Michigan all that time, and getting drafted by Detroit, right? A lot of Detroit fans, a lot of Lions fans are Michigan fans, and even the ones that aren't have grown to love Aiden Hutchinson. He's one of the faces of the city, and Michigan fans will remember what he did in 2021 for getting them over the hump and into the college football playoff, winning the Big Ten title. And the Lions were well on their way to winning plenty of more things. They won the North last year, the NFC North. They were the champions, and obviously came up short in the NFC Championship game. But yeah, he was, that was his seven and a half. He had 7.5 sacks,
Yep.
And all of a sudden, in the blink of an eye, his season is over. It's terrible, and you feel awful for the team because it's such a major loss, but you feel just as bad, if not worse, for him. And you can see him being carted off with his hands on his head, and just a brutal way to have your season end there. But the Lions are still a really good team, and I think they're going to be just all right. But boy, it's a major blow, and I think he's probably the most irreplaceable player on the team other than Jared Goff. Like, if Jared Goff went down with an injury like that and you knew he was done for the year, I think a lot of people would agree that the Lions would not be able to achieve their hopes of winning the Super Bowl. But Hutchinson is maybe not that quite of an extreme, but it's pretty close. I mean, that's just it's an awful loss.
For a non-quarterback, it's as close as it gets. Yeah. I am with Douglas. I think you go get Max Crosby, Trayvon Walker, Jacksonville. I feel like there's somebody, Hendrickson in Cincinnati. There's some edge guys available. He's needed a partner, obviously, with Davenport's injury. That's been brutal. But you're in that window now.
Yep.
That we were talking in the group chat before about, whatever you got to give up to get Crosby without auctioning off the future. I said, I don't care. This is the future. Like,
Yep.
you give up whatever, and then next year those two guys can partner together as well. But yeah, like you said, just devastated for him, dude. He's such a good dude. And again, what he's done on the field and off the field for the program at Michigan, the franchise in Detroit, the air in that stadium was gone. The team, fans, everybody.
Yep.
Yeah. So at this point, like I said, you just hope. I say hope because, man, a broken leg is brutal, right? But I do think of Zinter, who was fortunate to just have bone break, right? No ligaments or anything. Was able to bounce back relatively quickly for the injury. So we'll hope for the best there. But yeah, otherwise, just thoughts to Hutch, man, brutal. So, all right, never easy transition from something that sucks to let's have fun. But let's get into it. Winter sports, right? Michigan on their bye week. A interesting week of football as well. Oregon ends up defeating Ohio State, so they're kind of kings of the Big Ten right now. Penn State, very close game, has to go to overtime. They break the trend of the Big Ten teams traveling west and being able to get a victory. Only them and Indiana over UCLA this year have been able to pull that feat off. So that the conference is starting to shake out a little bit. But as we look ahead for Michigan football, we talked a little bit about this on the last pod, so try not to double dip too much here. But obviously this second half, much like the second half of their games this year, have largely defined narratives, is going to define the narrative of this season, right? Jack Tuttle appears to be the guy now moving forward. You would hope the offense finds a little bit of balance with Mullings and Edwards rushing, that somebody emerges as a receiving threat aside from Colston Loveland, and some of these defensive lapses start to get cleaned up. We kind of talked about it last week, Break, but like what a successful season looks like for Michigan at this point. I would say we all agreed the ceiling at this point is 9-3, meaning you win every game and split one of Oregon and Ohio State. I think that would be, frankly, that's dream scenario at this point. I think you're ecstatic with that finish. 8-4, meaning you win every game but Oregon and Ohio State. I think that's something you also have to probably be satisfied with at this point, because you watch that Oregon and Ohio State game, and I just kept thinking Michigan is not in the same category as these two teams anymore.
No, not at all. And first of all, what an entertaining game that was. That was amazing. That was great college football. And obviously it didn't end well there for Ohio State at the end. But just a great game. And those are clearly two of the better teams in the Big Ten. But in terms of what it means for Michigan, for me personally, I think it's going to come down to, can this team win the 4 games that everyone thought they would win going into the season? And those 4 games being Illinois, Michigan State, Indiana, and Northwestern. If this team can take care of business in those 4 games, and sure, it means they lose to Oregon and Ohio State, but if they can win the games they're supposed to win, or they were supposed to win going into the season, those 4 games, I think that's going to be that's obviously not going to change a whole lot, because no one's expecting them to go to the college football playoff at this point anyway. But that at least provides a glimmer of hope for the coaching staff and the program going forward, that they can take care of business, whether it be at home, on the road, against Michigan State or Illinois. Illinois is ranked 22nd in the country right now.
Yeah.
And Indiana is going to be probably ranked when the Wolverines go there too in November. We'll have to see what happens with Cignetti and the Hoosiers going forward. But for me personally, it comes down to those 4 games. If you win all 4, then you can be somewhat satisfied with how the last 6 games of the season shook out. But if you only win 3, I think you're a little disappointed. That puts you at 7-5. And if you only win 2, then you're looking at a 6-6 season. And I think that's extremely, obviously, disappointing. So it comes down to those 4 games for me. Can Michigan take care of business and do what everyone thought it was supposed to do going into the season?
I still think about one thing I said a lot this offseason, which was as much as the results would matter, I think how Michigan looked was going to matter more in terms of people's perception of Sharon Moore and the status of the program and how they felt moving forward. Um, and I think that's proven out because even in games Michigan has won, there's been so much frustration because of the second half collapses, like we've talked about, and just in how they've looked in these games. In Texas, I mean, at this point, it's a funny year to have a 12-team playoff because Texas right now just looks like a juggernaut in their own world. And then Oregon, Ohio State are probably somewhere there. I know Penn State right now is ranked above Ohio State. I'll be interested to see how that game goes. Maybe I'm just burned by Franklin too many times. I don't have Penn State in that same tier as them. And then, Georgia, obviously, we'll have to, that Georgia Texas game is going to be wild to see, they bounce back from the Alabama win. But yeah, there's just another league right now. So yeah, if you're competitive with an Oregon or Ohio State, you don't look like you did against Texas. I think you can find some good value because look, I said, if you go out and you lose to a better team because they're a better team, but you made it close, you maximized effort, you weren't shooting yourself in the foot, the vibes are good. You know what I mean? I think you can find something positive there moving forward. Man, Texas, though, I mean, that was just disheartening. It didn't even look like Michigan, right?
Yep.
And I think that's a big piece. Like I said, the look part. I know the coordinators for Michigan have been really defensive against fan narratives and us, writers. Look, some of these reporters are more aggressive than others in the way they ask questions. They definitely do have, their own agenda. So I get that. But look, the Michigan pass defense is borderline historically bad at this point. I mean, we're talking 115, 118, 112, and, bottom 10% of college football in a lot of these metrics when we expected this to be possibly the best pass defense in the country, right? And on the offensive side of the ball, the offense, again, historically bad. We used to always make the military academy jokes. You're not even there with military academies at this point, right? So that's got to improve. It's just, it has to look better. We have to see the ability to adjust and some sort of vision. But man, I'm with you. Michigan's what? 1.5 point favorites at Illinois right now. So not only are this team itself lower than we expected, Illinois is better than we thought they'd be. Indiana, again, I know they haven't played anybody, but you have to be impressed with what Signetti's doing. You got to go win those games on the road. And sandwiched between all of that is that Michigan State game that I know is making everyone nervous because they know that's the one you can't lose.
Yep. All the pressure is going to be on Michigan in that game. And, I know we talked about it a little bit last week, and I just mentioned the 4 games that, in my opinion, will kind of determine how people look at this Michigan football season. But I think you're exactly right with the Ohio State and Oregon games. I mean, if Oregon is a complete carbon copy of what happened against Texas, where Michigan's just getting blown out on its home turf, and Dylan Gabriel comes into the big house and throws for 300, 350 yards and just torches Michigan's defense. And then a few weeks later, you go to Columbus and don't look competitive and lose to the Buckeyes for the first time in 5 years. I mean, even if you win the other 4 games, it still goes to show just how far this program has fallen from the top in that instance, if you go and don't look competitive in those 2 big games. So in my opinion, the 4 games will kind of determine it, just because I personally have written off the other 2 as losses already. But if Michigan can go in there and look competitive and keep it close and somehow stop Oregon's high-powered offense and stop the Jeremiah Smiths and the Travion Hendersons and the Quinshawn Judkins, and you could go on and on, the Emeka Ibukas. I mean, if Michigan can somehow stop all those weapons, then I think a lot of people will be very optimistic about the future. But it really comes down to those 4 games. It comes down to the 4 games in terms of wins and losses, and then it comes down to those 2 big games in terms of how the eye test, if that makes sense, how Michigan looks in those 2 games.
I agree. But I mean, also realistically, I mean, we're forward thinking, but in terms of the rest of the games, but this Illinois game's already a giant fork in the road, because if they don't show following a loss on the road to Washington, which again, at the beginning of the year, we were talking about like trap games. And was Washington the biggest trap game? Because, it's on the road, so it might prove to be a little bit more difficult. And it's before the bye, so they might be looking ahead to the break. You know what I mean? And now it's a game they weren't even favored in.
Yep.
So I think if you don't bounce back from that loss and having a bye week and come back against Illinois, which is, again, a team we're discussing as a possible trap game right before the rivalry on the road, blah, blah, blah. If they look the same in this game as they've looked in even games they've won where you're getting out coached, outplayed in the second half, I think there's going to be not only no dent in the anxiety, it'll probably go up. If you lose that game, man, now we're going to start getting real uncomfortable because you don't have another chance to reset. And now you're taking on Sparty, and then Oregon's coming, and then the rest of the season, it's just going to happen so fast. And then you start to get into that dangerous 6-6, 7-5 territory. So Illinois, looking at that game, what are your feelings on that? And again, maybe what Michigan's got to do, or what are you expecting? I guess.
To be honest, I don't know what I'm expecting. It's kind of been that way the whole season with this team. Sometimes you expect Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant and the rest of the defense to dominate, and then they don't. And other times they look really good, and it's just been inconsistency all season. But me personally, I'm taking Illinois in this game. I don't know if we were going to have a prediction segment later on, but I'm just going to come out right now and say it. I think Illinois is going to win this game, and I think fans should be looking for, first of all, can Michigan throw a forward pass? I think that's the biggest thing a lot of people are looking for is what does Jack Tuttle look like in the offense with what we presume to be a full game of operating the offense and throwing the football. How do the receivers look? Can guys like Amarian Walker get settled in? Samaj Morgan, Tyler Morris. I mean, that's been the storyline of the season. I mean, those guys just have not. You mentioned it. It's worse than the armies and the navies and the air forces. Those guys, and that's the biggest thing. I mean, you have to develop a passing attack if you're going to be successful or competitive in the second half of the season, and it's got to start against Illinois. And yeah, I mean, I mean, this is a real scenario here where if Michigan goes in and loses this game, like I think they will, they fall to 4-3, and it's a 2-game losing streak, and all of a sudden you have to turn around and play your rival Michigan State. All the pressure will be on you. Michigan State won't have any pressure, and it's all on Michigan to rebound from that and avoid losing what would be one of the worst games ever, like right up there with 2020 probably.
Yep.
And dropping to 4-4. I mean, that's what they're going to be playing for if they lose this Illinois game. But if they win, obviously the narrative changes. But I mean, they have to develop a passing attack. That's where it starts.
Yeah, I think there's been, I mean, not even think, we know there was some arrogance coming into this year about the passing attack, because I think what Michigan was able to show last year with JJ McCarthy was, look, we're going to win football games. However, we think we can win the game if that's running the ball 30 times against Penn State, blah, blah, blah. Right. But when the switch needed to turn on, you had JJ McCarthy. Right. And we all knew it was going to take a step back. We all knew that. Like, nobody came in here thinking, I thought the offense had chances to be better in some areas just because of them adapting to the strengths of the team. But like, no one thought you were going to duplicate what JJ did, right? We thought the defense was going to be so good that the offense basically just needs to be what Cade was in 2021, which always sounds like a knock. Cade was better than I think he probably gets credit for in 21. But again, the idea was go out there, move the ball, score enough points, don't turn it over. And then obviously, Warren gets to start first and has the turnovers, and then Orji goes out there, and the offense doesn't appear to be doing anything to cater to his strengths. His strengths don't look as good as we thought they would be. And, he's unplayable at this point. And then Tuttle comes in and, Brandon brings up a good point. I think it's going to be the key with this Illinois game. There's no denying the visual spark that Jack Tuttle brought to that offense when he came into the game against Washington.
Yeah.
Can't deny it. Michigan gets the lead, feels like, okay, not only has this game been saved, but man, is this Cade against Rutgers? Is this, the inspiration moving forward? Now we can feel better about a lot of things for the rest of the year. And it's the same thing. The second half collapsed. The Michigan defense gives up 3 scoring drives, a field goals in the middle of that, but 3 straight drives where Illinois scores. Tuttle bails on a pocket too early, fumbles the ball, has the interception, the 2 turnovers. I don't know. I still think Michigan can and should win this football game. It's tough to know following that Purdue game what Illinois is. I know Walters is on the other side, so there's probably some shared knowledge, if you will, that makes that game a little different. But what was it, 50-49 or something?
Yeah.
OT Purdue. I mean, that's wild. Gosh, who have they? But man, Luke Altmaier is doing so much better than I ever would have guessed this year. He got 14 touchdowns, 1 pick, 67% completion, 1,400 yards. If I would have told you at the start of the year, you would kill to have Luke Altmaier on your team as your quarterback, man. I mean, he's been balling out, and the Illinois defenses look good. So it's going to be a mental thing. Are they going to come out and fire it up and take the lead quick? And then can they show the ability to hold on to a lead and win it? Are they going to have to fight back and show they can? I mean, overcoming adversity was so cliche under Harbaugh. We heard it so much, right? But we're in it right now. This is it. Like, this is a big statement. And I'm with you. The MSU game, I always bring up 2020 as what I thought was the worst of the Harbaugh era, because whatever excuse you want to make for Michigan State can make too, maybe even worse.
Yep.
Right. So the only difference this year is, I think, you've got coaching changes. Jonathan Smith gets in there earlier, right? With Tucker, they were the ones that got in late. And then with COVID, had no chance to implement anything, right? So Jonathan Smith gets in and has some time to establish some guys, but that roster is decimated, right? The players leave. You get some transfers to come in, some folks from Oregon State. They've been very candid about their NIL struggles after their program. NIL was literally shut down in the middle of last season, right? We've seen some hiccups there. If Mel Tucker and Michigan State don't win in 2020, they don't win in 2021 either, because they don't have Kenneth Walker.
Yep.
They used that Michigan victory as the only recruiting tool for that offseason. The game was playing inside of meeting rooms, because they were 2-5, I think, on the year. And they had beaten, it was Rutgers, or I don't remember who else the bad team was they had won. But the difference between, 2 wins and one of them's over Michigan and 1 win is massive. No Kenneth Walker, no great 2021 season for them. Tucker probably never gets to the controversy because he's fired way before that, right? So this year, you lose to Michigan State. Again, the momentum swing that would go to Sparty's favor, the unnecessary benefit you would give them in terms of recruiting and just mood in the state and everything. And then you, Sharon Moore, trying to bounce back from that. Jim Harbaugh had a legacy established at Michigan. He had a legacy from his time as a head coach in 2020. Obviously, things were down. I know no one wants to admit to it now. You can't find any of them. A lot of people wanted Jim Harbaugh fired. Let's be honest, right? Mm-hmm. But he was able to make these massive coaching changes. He had the roster to do it, to bounce back from that MSU loss. It's still unbelievable, right? It's unbelievable. But looking back, you can see how the pieces were there. If Michigan loses to Michigan State this year, yes, Sharon Moore can make coaching changes and such, but is he going to have access to the same type of hires that Sharon Moore did, getting a Mike McDonald from the Ravens, right? The roster, we've already talked about this roster we don't know what's going to happen in the portal, but the roster is likely worse next year. I don't know if you bounce back from an MSU loss trajectory wise.
Yeah, it does seem really program defining. And it changes. It feels like a game that could change the future. I mean, for 3 years now, Michigan's been looked at as the premier school in the state of Michigan, and it's recruited as such. It's landed a lot of the top guys in the state of Michigan, and Michigan State has had sort of this revolving door at head coach, going from D'Antonio then to Tucker and now with Jonathan Smith. So they haven't really had a chance to build momentum. But if Jonathan Smith comes in first year and beats Michigan in the Big House, I mean, that just feels like such a momentum shifter, such a change in the rivalry. I mean, Michigan's been trending in this thing. They've won 2 years in a row, and it could be 3. And I feel like if Michigan does win for a third year in a row against Michigan State, that'll be big. It feels like it's big either way. And it's kind of weird saying that, knowing how both teams are really struggling right now. Like it's obviously not as big as it was in 2021 in terms of that game that season, but for both these teams who are honestly kind of average right now, it seems huge. It seems like the winner of that game is going to be in a really good position. I mean, Jonathan Smith, if the Spartans go out there and win that game, he's going to use that in recruiting. He's going to use that to go recruit guys in the state of Michigan and in the Midwest and really build based on that win in the Big House. And if Sharon Moore wins, he can say, hey, here's Michigan and we've beaten Michigan State now 3 years in a row. Come to Michigan. And that's what Sharon Moore can say. And it feels really, really big. And it's, like I said, it's really weird saying that, knowing that Michigan's 4-2 and could be 4-3, and Michigan State is 3-3, and they play Iowa. They could be 3-4, right? And so it's really strange. But yeah, I mean, everything's going to be riding on that game, and it won't have the implications it did in 2021, but it sort of seems that way, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, there's not as much on the line for this season. That's the big change, but it's easy to project out, right? You brought up recruiting, and that's the biggest piece of this, right? Moore gets the benefit of not only being able to sell the success that existed at Michigan in the previous years because he was so instrumental to it, but he also kind of gets to be the new guy in town and sell a vision of the future, which can maybe cover for some of the issues they're having this year, right? So it's an interesting benefit he's going to have in terms of recruiting. We've already seen some positives in terms of what he's done behind the scenes, completely revolutionizing the recruiting department in terms of commits that have come in. As much as QB is a problem right now, you've got Carter Smith for the following year. You've got Brady Hart. There's some talk I'm not going to bring up right now because I'm not ready to talk about it, but there's other QB talk out there, right? And there's a world where this class finishes strong. Josh posted some intel a few days ago about Andrew Babaloa. I know I've seen some couple comments about him already. Michigan staff was in to see him Friday. On threes, Steve Wiltfong dropped his Fong bomb and said he does think Michigan is going to be the choice there. I think that's monumental for multiple reasons. I think he's a big piece that this has always felt like a Michigan-Stanford battle. I know some other programs have got in it. Brock, I don't know how up you are on recruiting. You never know, right, with you when I'm throwing recruiting at you, but I'll make a big picture for you either way. The Auburn talk, I struggle to buy into it because it's like he's been so diligent in his recruitment. Babaloa has, for him to pick Auburn would just be a slap in the face of his behavior for this last year. It just wouldn't make sense to me. But anyway, if you get him with the questions that exist around the offensive line, one, Grant Newsome and Moore can still recruit that group. You get a franchise left tackle. You already have Andrew Sprague in this last class. You have Blake Frazier as well, Evan Link, whatever. You as a staff are clearly positive about his development, what you think he's going to become with another year. Babaloa could start next year, legitimately. I think that's a high probability. They would probably go to the portal, but that's, how good he is and how much Michigan needs him. But also, we've seen the spark that can come in recruiting when you get a big prospect like that. We know Michigan's been targeting some big time flips. There's some momentum building there. And I think, to your point, you beat Illinois, you beat Michigan State, you give them something tangible that helps you finish the class strong. And then if it's, I've got Babaloa and a couple big flips at corner and some other pieces, I finish 8-4, I've got something to hold on to. I think the positivity meter can go up. You lose to Michigan State and maybe don't get that recruiting bump. It's just crazy. It feels I hate to be so dramatic and feel like that, like amazing best case scenario, amazing worst are the only two scenarios, but man, it just feels like a lot hinges on the next couple weeks on the field and off.
Yeah, it's a turning point. These last 6 games, if Michigan goes out there and completely shows a disappointing effort in those 6 games and goes something like 3-3 and finishes the year 7-5 or even 2-4 and goes 6-6, I think a lot of recruits and potential transfer portal candidates are going to be looking, really wondering what's going on with Sharon Moore and the staff there, going from 15-0 national champions down to something like 6-6 or 7-5. I mean, that's quite a dramatic fall. But like we talked about earlier, if Michigan can win the 4 games that I think everyone expected them to win going in and then be competitive against Oregon and Ohio State, I think that's going to be huge. I mean, recruiting wise and for the sake of being able to get guys out of the transfer portal, that drop off isn't as dramatic. You know, going from 15-0 down to barely being bowl eligible to in comparison to going from 15-0 down to, okay, you know, Michigan was 8-4 but lost to Texas, Oregon, Ohio State. That Washington loss is going to look bad, really, no matter what. But if 3 of your 4 losses are to 3 of the best teams in the country, then I think it's a lot easier for recruits and people to still be high on Michigan. But it really is a turning point. These last 6 games of the season, when Michigan isn't really going to be playing for much, it's a turning point for the future.
Yeah. And it is what it is.
It is what it is. Right.
Shout out Josh, who obviously is not with us right now. I don't know, Henry. I'm with you. He says Michigan's winning one of the Oregon-Ohio State games. I don't know. I thought, again, the winning Washington would have been so big, dude. You're 5-1 going into the bye. You can say, I don't care what happened to get to 5-1. Now my only loss is Texas. I can get healthy, right? That's a big piece we haven't touched on yet. Obviously, this team is banged up, right? Hinton's been their best left tackle. I don't think he's going to be back yet. We'll see. Again, I'm not a doctor or whatever, but I don't get the vibe he's going to be back yet, which means Percy's in it left still. And if you want someone to challenge Link, that's not happening yet, right? Will's still coming back from his injury. Hasn't been 100%. Loveland obviously hasn't been 100%. You've traded off weeks with Morris and Morgan. You've traded off weeks with Stewart and Moore. So you hope they get healthy coming back. But man, if you would have been able to go 7-1 into that Oregon game, what a difference you're talking about. Now Illinois might completely alter the trajectory of your entire season. It is wild. But yeah, we are going to be talking about all of this, obviously, heading into the week over at michigan.rivals.com. Recruiting intel, there is some coming, right? We've got some Babaloa talk already. Like I said, some QB stuff we're going to start to get into. So if you are not a subscriber already, please make sure michigan.rivals.com. Join us, be a part of the den. Some of that QB intel I'm talking about is already there, thanks to a member of ours who happens to work with some Michigan collective. I'll say that. Yeah. So if you're not a subscriber already, use code BLUE30 to join, get the first month free with everything picking up right now, recruiting, the football season kicking off. And what we're going to get into now, basketball and hockey. Now is a good time to join. So, Brock, we talked about this last week too. If you believe in the ecosystem of football and basketball, your optimism should be rising for Dusty May's basketball team. But look, honestly, optimism was rising already. He's come in and done a lot of things right on the macro and the micro, right? Just the little things of meeting with, some of the student section folks, some of the fraternities, obviously what he's done in terms of NIL and meeting with some of the big dogs, an aggressive and successful transfer portal, I will say. But there is some question about maybe how all these pieces are going to fit, right? And is there a go-to star, if you will, on this roster? We don't know, right, until the season begins. But tell me, let's start with that. I mean, Dusty May's first year, obviously, and kind of establishing the framework for his program. Very similar to what we just saw and talked about with Sharon Moore, right? This is a whole new roster for Dusty May. A lot of his own fingerprints already on the program.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see what happens in this first year with Dusty May. He's talked, I mean, as long as he's been in Ann Arbor, literally since his introductory press conference, he's talked about how he wants this team to play fast. And, a lot of coaches say that when they first get hired in, but Dusty May really means it. And, this team has the opportunity to do that. He, like you mentioned, he recruited really well out of the transfer portal and built up the roster from basically nothing. He, if you recall back in March and April, he had no coaching staff and really no guys on the roster other than Will Cheddar, Namari Burnett, and Jace Howard. And he's got to go and build up a roster. A lot of the freshmen that were committed decommitted, and he ended up bringing in a few other freshmen, but it's going to be interesting to see. And 1 week from today, we're going to see what it looks like against Oakland at Little Caesars Arena. But what's most intriguing to me is how I mentioned he wants to play fast. He wants to get out. He wants the defense never to get set. That's what he said that at Big Ten Media Days. He said that throughout the offseason. He wants, if the other team scores a bucket, boom, the ball's in and it's out and going. They don't have a set guy to bring the ball up the court, not like a true point guard, if you will, to really bring the ball up and get into an offense. They're just going to get it out and go to whoever's open and get that outlet pass going. But what's interesting to me is that they fully intend, at least in my opinion, and what we've heard from Dusty May, they fully intend on starting 2 7-footers in Vlad Golden and Danny Wolf. And so what I'm going to be looking for on Sunday is how does that look? Because you wouldn't normally see a team, getting out and running really fast with 2 7-footers in the starting lineup. Sure. And I'm really curious to see what that's going to look like. But really excited for the Dusty May era. I think, like you mentioned, if the football and basketball paradox is true, how we've seen in recent years as Michigan basketball has kind of fallen off and the football team has risen. Now that the football team is struggling a little bit, maybe the basketball team will play a little bit better, but should be fun to see what happens on Sunday against Oakland.
Unsurprisingly, I think you nailed it in terms of, this is what we expect to see. And I think if we see it, we're going to be happy, which is that pace, right? The defense last year was just atrocious. Comical. You and I remember just laughing some of the short clips we would post. Like, what were they even thinking here, right? So to see a team defensively strong and communication, and then, like you said, speed, getting back up the floor and never letting the other team get set. So much talk of the NBA style of basketball Jawan wanted to bring. I think this is a style of ball that a lot of people would be excited to see. When he first got Wolf, and then we knew Vlad was coming, that was, months in the making. That was really bizarre, but we just kind of assumed he was going to be there. I talked about both of them playing together, and it kind of went back and forth. We didn't know what was going to end up happening, but Wolf being that stretch 4, if you will. I think what's going to be interesting is not just starting the two of them, because we saw in the past Michigan play 2 big guys too, when they were kind of trying to expand Hunter's role. And I wonder if it's going to be something similar, but bench rotation as well. So, like, I guess first off, who do you think are going to be the other starters along with Wolf and Vlad? Could we see some rotation there? But then when it comes to the bench, it feels like you might start both 7, but you pretty much want one of them on the floor at all times, right?
Yeah.
So, how are they going to rotate the front court? And I know it's a really loaded question, but who do you think starting with those two? And then how do you think they're going to rotate that front court?
Yeah. So starting alongside Vlad and Danny, I would say you're going to see Trey Donaldson start. Mm-hmm. I think he'll be the quote unquote point guard, even though I just mentioned they won't have a set guy bringing the ball up the floor, but he's going to be the one, if you will, Trey Donaldson. And I think you'll see a guy like Reuben Jones. I think Roddy Gale will start too. I think you'll see Donaldson, Roddy Gale, Golden, Wolf, and Reuben Jones. It could be Namari Burnett. I don't know if Dusty May is thinking to bring him off the bench as more of an experienced shooter, but I think you will see Donaldson, Gale, and Golden and Wolf for sure. I'm not sure who the fifth would be, but to your point about the big men down low, you got to have one of them, at least one of them, on the court at all times. I think that's fully what Dusty May intends on doing, is having at least one of them out there. But he talked back in August about how in this style of play where these guys are running so fast, it's really hard for the players to play 32,
35 minutes
33.
or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. They're moving so fast and running so fast.
Which last year you were getting all your starters were playing 36 to 40, right?
Right.
You can have the depth.
Yep. There were multiple games where Doug McDaniel played 40 minutes last year. And that was just a crazy season. But they're going to have to build depth. If that's going to work.
I'm laughing because you said Doug and it like brought me back. And I'm like, man, it feels forever ago, but it really wasn't.
It does feel a long time ago, but he's off to Kansas State now. Anyway, they're going to have to build depth. I mean, if this is going to work where you're getting out and running with 2 7-footers on the court for, I don't know, 15 to 20 minutes a game, maybe, I would assume.
That they both would be out there. Yeah. Wow. Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe I would guess maybe 15 to 20 when they're both on the floor, and then they each get 10 or so alone, maybe, is what I'm guessing. But they're going to have to build depth, and Will Cheddar is going to have to be huge as a 4. I don't think he'll see. There were a lot of times last year he played the small ball 5, and that's not going to happen this year. I wouldn't guess. He's going to be more of a traditional 4, I would think. And you're going to see Sam Walters on the floor, lights out shooter,
yep.
lefty from Alabama.
You put a little accent on that.
Did I?
Yeah, lefty from Alabama. Can't help it.
Yeah, but yeah, those guys are gonna have to be huge in order to spell Golden and Wolf. I mean, just getting them rest, because it's going to be running, and I think Michigan fans better hope that Dusty May had those guys doing cardio all summer, because that's going to be required for playing in this type of system.
And for those who haven't read it, if you just Google search Michigan basketball preview rivals, it should come up. Otherwise, you can search it obviously at michigan.rivals.com. But Brock's basketball preview packs a lot of punch. It's not extremely long, easy to consume, but there's a lot of good stuff in here. You just kind of got into it, the battle of length versus shooting, right? There are some intriguing options on this team. You just brought up the lefty from Alabama and his ability to shoot. Wolf has some 3-point shooting in his game as well. I think about now when we get to the backcourt, right? I think a lot of people think Trey Donaldson could be the guy, right? That ends up being maybe the go-to scorer, like you said, not in a true traditional point guard role, maybe, but Roddy Gale and Reuben Jones are 2 guys that have shown flashes, and maybe injuries have, impacted them a little bit. Was it Gale's wrist, and that was the drop off in the 3-point shooting, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
It feels like either one of those guys could become like really, really good Big Ten basketball players. And if both of them kind of click and reach this level of expectation, again, like you said, with Jones, it'll be interesting how he rotates and Burnett gets used. And I mean, we'll have to get into some of the depth too. Freshman has been getting a lot of hype in this offseason as well with that backcourt. But do you see a star per se among this group, or somebody that could really break out and be a big name? Or is there just better chance of a good committee approach, which might happen anyway, just with the amount of minutes they're going to have to share, like you said?
I think it's going to be committee. Honestly, I don't see one player on this roster that really stands out apart from the rest as someone that can just dominate a game and take over. I think it's going to be team basketball and Michigan just wearing you down and getting scoring from a lot of different guys. I think you'll see a lot of games this season where you'll get the entire starting 5 could be in double figures. You never know with this group. And I think that's one of the best brands of basketball to play. A lot of times in the past, Michigan's really relied on guys like Hunter Dickinson to go out there and score 30, or Doug McDaniel scoring a lot of points. And it's not going to be that way. And this team is going to have Trey Donaldson, Roddy Gale Jr., who shot 42% from beyond the arc as a freshman at Ohio State. And then, like you mentioned, he had that wrist injury, and his percentage plummeted. I think he shot 28% last year, but 42% as a freshman for Roddy Gale Jr. He's a guy who can shoot it. I mentioned Sam Walters. Reuben Jones is experienced. Namari Burnett, obviously experienced and can shoot it. A lot of Michigan fans saw that last year. And then obviously you have the big men down low. Will Cheddar, just a blue-collar guy that's going to go out there and get you points. I mean, there were games he scored 20 last year. And Burnett scored 20 a few times last year as well. And so to answer your question, I think it's going to be a complete committee. And you mentioned the freshman, LJ Kaysen. He's earned a lot of hype this summer. People are very high on him in the program, and they think they got a good one with Kaysen. He was originally committed to Florida Atlantic before Dusty May was hired by Michigan, and then made the move north, I should say, to Michigan, away from the beach there in Boca Raton. But yeah, a lot of guys that could really score. They think Kaysen could be an impact guy as a freshman right away, and really looking forward to the committee approach that they have in terms of scoring.
I'm with you in terms of the brand of basketball that I would enjoy Michigan playing. I don't mind there being a guy that can get you 20 a night. I think about like Hunter at his best, but getting those multiple guys that can get you double digits. And like you said, the sparks off the bench, the blue collar, I loved Terrence Williams coming off the bench.
Yep.
Just that energy that he brought. And it was like, look, he could get you 4 to 6 points and maybe 4 to 6 rebounds or whatever, but just having that, I think Cheddar can absolutely be that dude that's just going to bring awesome energy for the 15 or 20 minutes you get him. Burnett too, whether he starts or I feel like I like the idea of him coming off the bench though. And again, you say the bench like it's a bad thing, but in this era of basketball, I mean, a guy off the bench can play as much more minutes than a starter even, right? It's all just about roles and maximizing your value, if you will, to the team. But like the Michigan teams, I like, oh man, Chauncey Brown.
Yep.
And if he was feeling it, the dude was going to hit 5 or 6 threes for you. Those kind of teams were so good and fun in a Big Ten schedule too. Which, look, you don't got to give me an exact record. We don't got to get crazy with the predictions here, but we talked about Michigan coming into the season. If you go 9-3, win the games you're supposed to, football, excuse me. You go 9-3, you win the games you're supposed to, you lose the other ones, maybe back into the playoff, blah, blah. Like that kind of realm of expectations. Non-conference, they got kind of a fun game with TCU, right? Get to see Frankie Collins. Yeah. There's some big out of conference on here as well. Arkansas, Oklahoma. Get Sparty twice this year at Ohio State for the one game, which basketball, figure it out. You can do all this work to protect rivalries and stuff in football. Like, I don't know. I'd rather play Ohio State twice every year. That's just me, maybe. I don't know. But yeah, with this conference, I don't feel is there a dominant team in this conference? Is there a top 6 that Michigan can get into and maybe be competitive in the conference and in the tournament? And where I guess what's successful look like for you? And where do you think they fit in this kind of different Big Ten this year?
Well, this is the most wide open the Big Ten has been in years, in my opinion. Like, it's not even close. The last few years you've had teams like Purdue, Illinois, Michigan State's been in there, Indiana a few times maybe. You've had a clear top group. And sure, Purdue got the most first place votes in the preseason Big Ten poll, but they're losing the 2-time national player of the year, right, in Zach Edey. And I don't think anyone expects them to be the same. Of course, they return Braden Smith and Fletcher Lawyer and guys like that. But I mean,
I laugh at all the memes of like anytime you see some like tall monster, and it's like, oh, Purdue just offered him.
Yeah.
Every time you think you're done with the big man, they got another one coming. Sorry, go ahead.
They build those guys in the lab. But
For sure.
anyway, it's wide open, and you can go back and forth and talk about what success looks like for this team, but it's impossible to predict what this team is going to be capable of. I think some people are hopeful they could go to the NCAA tournament, maybe win a game, but who knows? They could have a ton of growing pains that last throughout most of the season, and they could really struggle to figure things out. It's almost impossible to determine how successful this team could be. I would say, as a baseline, just make the tournament. I would say after going 8-24 last year and missing the tournament each of the last 2 years, just make the tournament. I don't care what anything else looks like. Just make the tournament. I feel like a lot of fans will be happy with that and would consider the season a success. But aside from that single benchmark, I don't know how you could put parameters on what this team is capable of doing.
Yeah, I think similar to what I said with Moore, how does it look? Right? We had effort conversations last year, right? Like let's not talk about that. Let's see a team that has, the fundamentals down, the base, that's coached well, that fights through every whistle, fights to end the games, maybe wins a game you don't think they're going to, doesn't show up and just not play against a team they should win. Tell you what, a lot of folks made a lot of money last year betting on Michigan leading at the half and then failing to cover. Right? I don't remember how many times that happened last year. Just bizarre. It's hard for me to not get too excited about this team, though. I really like the pieces in the transfer portal. I think you start going through the if-then scenarios, and if a few of these guys hit on their potential, I think there's a really, really good team. I said top 6. I think that's probably where I want them in the Big Ten. I don't know how competitive they need to be in terms of like competing for it. You start talking top 4 and, if they're in the conversation, that's great. But yeah, getting into the tournament, a 6 to a 10 seed probably would, in a spot where like you feel good about winning a first game. I'm with you. I think that would be great. You kind of forget where we're coming from until you just said it. 2 straight years without making the tournament. I mean, it's wild how quick that happened. So yeah, being competitive and winning some games, but man, you could see this accelerate quickly, potentially. You hope it does, right? But just good, entertaining basketball team that's a competitive. That there's nothing like having Illinois come into your house and just absolutely beat the crap out of you. It's awful. Take over your arena, just gross, right? So, yeah, I don't know. I don't know if it's Purdue or Indiana. Sparty's not hyped as much as they've been, and I don't know. I don't know if it's wide open enough to say I think Michigan could win the Big Ten this year, but I think they could. I think they could be competitive for sure.
Yeah,
if all things go right. Yeah, so we'll see. Obviously, it's more about the culture and the foundation and recruiting too. We just got done talking about with more. Dusty May's got potential for some big recruiting wins. Obviously, you got Trey McKinney, the local product. There's some international folks. There's some, I don't want to get into it too much because I'm going to look very unknowledgeable because I haven't looked at basketball recruiting in depth in the last few weeks, but there's some dominoes lining up where it's like, hey, again, maybe that bump Howard had, it didn't work out right with Diabate at Houston, but like, I mean, he's been in recruitments with Kansas's and Dukes and things like that early on. So we'll see, but optimism high. And if the ecosystem can find a way for balance where both teams can be good, us as Michigan fans would love it. But, all right, let's spend a little bit of time here at the end of the show talking about one of my favorite sports. I don't know why I don't get into it more. I'm really trying to dedicate. Well, I do know why, because the Red Wings have been terrible for the last few years. It's been hard, but hockey, man, hockey. Kind of the opposite in terms of basketball. Back to back Frozen Four appearances for Brandon Roto. That came out of my mouth funny. Anyway, look, I think we knew there was a good chance with all the trade rumors that existed around Rutger that he wasn't going to be on this team. Once we learned that him not signing with Winnipeg wasn't about him staying at Michigan, but not wanting to play for Winnipeg. And now he's obviously on Pittsburgh, and he's going to be on their roster. He's starting with them. That was kind of a hit, but this team still has, I mean, man, you lost Nazar, you lost Brindley, you lost Duke, Seamus Casey, who was a team leader in assists last year, I believe, or second maybe. Yeah. You lost some dudes, but again, guys that have come back, some transfers. There were some really good incoming transfer additions as well. Where are you with this hockey team? I know that they just started. I don't know that we can make any drastic conclusions from their 2 season splits to start the year. Does it feel like maybe the star power we've seen in recent years, the clear, top 5 pick, if you will, on the team? But for me, it's, finding that depth, the multiple lines that can score goals, and then the netminder, right? That I think that's going to be a big piece of. There was a lot of games last year, as good as they had goalie play, I'm not trying whatever, but there was a lot of games last year where too many pucks got in and there just wasn't enough the offense could do.
Yeah, this team, it's weird to talk about it because they've been to 3 straight Frozen Fours, but it almost seems like they're in a tough spot because the last few years, like you mentioned, they've had the star power of Adam Fantilli, literally the number 1 overall pick, if I remember right. Maybe not, actually.
No, he went second.
Did he?
Or third? Now I don't remember. I think he was supposed to go second, but he went third. Is that it?
Yeah, he got drafted behind Connor Bedard, I think. Now that I'm talking through it, but anyway, you had Adam Fantilli, the Hobie Baker Award winner. That's what he did win. He won the Hobie Baker Award, and you've had the Rucker McGroartys and the Seamus Caseys and Gavin Brindley's, guys like those. Gavin Brindley was the Big Ten Player of the Year last year, and Michigan just doesn't.
My ADHD won't help me if I don't get this out. You're right. Bedard went first. Everybody thought Fantilli was going to go second to the Ducks, but they ended up taking Leo Carlson.
Yes.
And then Blue Jackets took him third. That's what it was.
Right.
Sorry.
So that's all right. Michigan, though, this year doesn't have, I wouldn't say, the star power that they've had in recent years. It is more of a committee approach, like we just talked about in basketball, to the point where they could get scoring from anywhere. And early on this season, we've seen it from Garrett Shifsky, sophomore forward, who's really shown out. I think he's got 2 goals already this season at least. But it's an interesting spot because, like I said, they've been to 3 straight Frozen Fours, but it almost seems like they're trying so hard to get over that hump, and they just can't seem to do it. And if they weren't able to do it with guys like Adam Fantilli and Rucker McGroarty and Luke Hughes and guys like that, I don't know if they're going to be able to do it with a group of younger guys like Derek mentioned in the comments. But we'll have to wait and see. It's really early on, like you said, and goaltending is going to be huge. Jake Barczewski, the transfer in last year, struggled at times, I would say, and even the year before that, Eric Portillo wasn't
as good as he was. He had moments, yeah, for sure.
Yep, he had moments where he slipped up, and this year it's going to be on Logan Stein, transfer in from Ferris State, if I remember correctly.
Yep.
And
Ferris State.
He posted some crazy stats last year, if my memory serves me correctly. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens there. But yeah, it's so tough when you've had so much success but haven't really won one national championship, and that's what this team's goal is. And it's so hard. Brandon Naurato talked about it in the preseason media availability. Was just, we know how hard it is to get there. We just have to get the guys to buy in again and try and punch a ticket to a 4th straight Frozen Four.
Michigan hockey is, I mean, very similar to Michigan State basketball in a lot of ways, right?
Yeah. Yep.
They are good every year. They're always going to be competitive. Maybe the years you think they're absolutely the best and for sure going to win the Natty don't necessarily go that way, right? And maybe some of the years like this one where you're not really sure what they're going to be end up being some of their best seasons, right? So it's tough. You can't ever count them out, but yeah, it's hard to. I mean, I know they have Michael Haig, obviously the Canadians draft pick, which what an incredible story. His father, a massive Montreal fan who had passed away, and he ends up going to his childhood team that his father loved. I think that's so cool. I think he leads in points. I know it's only 4 games, but I think he's leading in points right now. Yes. Yep. 3 goals, 3 assists.
Yeah.
Yep. And then, yeah, I mean, you still have the other Duke brother, TJ Hughes. I'm looking at this and there's a lot of names I'm just not super familiar with. Adam's brother, Luca, is still around, but he's not Adam, right? Which a lot of people aren't. That's not an insult. I want to go back to the goalie though. I think that's so huge. I need to get over it, but I continue to think if Augustine had stuck at Michigan and not gone to Michigan State, Michigan's winning more of those games. I know they won the one that mattered at the end, but man, Michigan State's a really good squad, right? Coming back this year as well. But man, I wonder if they could have won it all if he was in the net last year. Again, no offense to Barczewski, but they've split the goalies to start the year, which is kind of wild because, like you said, you've got the 5th-year senior transfer from Ferris State, and then you also have the freshman. Is it Cameron Corpy? Is that how you pronounce it?
Yeah, Corpy.
Yeah. I'm thinking about the Red Wings where it's like you got 5 goalies. If you could combine them into one, maybe whatever. Is this a battle that's gonna like go throughout the year? Are they gonna continue to rotate these guys? Is it just early, so whatever, and it's gonna end up being Stein's gig? Is it a hot hand situation? I don't know. I'm anxious because man, freshman and 5th-year senior, and I mean the hope with Stein, Ferris was terrible.
Yeah,
they were terrible last year, and he still had. I'm with you. It was like 92% save rate, giving up less than 3 goals. Which you think, okay, if I take that, and obviously some really good things on tape from a bad team, and I put you on a really good team, then we talked about that with football all the time, raising the ceiling of a player going from a bad team to a good team. But anyway, that I can't stop focusing on goalie just because the teams I like. It's been such a major sticking point the last few years.
Well, I feel like it's almost like quarterback, where we've been talking all season with Michigan football. That's if that's what Michigan ends up doing, just rotating guys all season, I wouldn't be in favor of that personally. Right. I think you'd like to get a guy in there and really let him get acquainted with being the starting goaltender and knowing every night he's going to be the guy in the net. But we've seen teams like the Red Wings, I think last season, did a lot of rotating at goalie. And that might just be what teams do now. I'm not much of a hockey fanatic by any means, but Corpy has a lot of talent. Let's just put that out there right now. To be able to be 100%. Coming in as a true freshman, competing with a 5th-year senior who had pretty good stats on a terrible Ferris State team, like you mentioned last year, it's impressive. And, maybe they're just wondering, they'll try both guys out in the first few games this season and see if Corpy's talent shines or if Stein's experience is more of what they're looking for in net. But I personally would not be in favor of rotating both of those guys throughout the majority of the year. And I think if you have to pick one, you have to go with Stein, just because he's the guy who is going to be out of eligibility, and you still would have a few more years of Corpy if he elects to stay. But yeah, I would lean towards Stein personally.
Yeah, and I feel the same way. I guess when I think about the tackle battle with football, I do like the idea of a younger player and getting him some reps and what that would mean. Corpy's going to be really good. And if he's getting the reps, I'm happy with that. If he's the better player, that's where I'm at. I play whoever's better. I don't care. Don't get cute with it. Whether you want to call it meritocracy, whatever it is. I mean, he's gonna be a really good goalie. Obviously, he's got NHL potential. He's one of and man, the recruits coming in too. That's the other thing. I think for me for this season, it's about maintaining momentum. I think there was a lot of concern. It's very similar to Moore. You promote the interim head coach, right? You look at obviously he had a full season of interim. It's a little bit different, not 4 games or whatever it might be. There's a lot of this continuity talk and maintaining, success that existed before. With all the recruiting good that's been going on and what's coming in, it just feels like you just got to maintain momentum. Have a strong year this year. Make it work with the group you have. Man, if you're in the Frozen Four again, awesome. Okay. But win the games you're supposed to. Don't lose the ones you're not, right? Very similar that we've talked about in a lot of sports. But, man, I don't know. I don't think I'm going to predict Frozen 4 just because it'd be outrageous. It'd be cool. I'd be stoked about it. There's good leadership on this team. It's kind of different in that aspect with football. Your leaders aren't necessarily your best players, but there is some good veteran leadership on this team as well. But
and you have to remember too that last year's team wasn't comfortably in the tournament until late in the season. It took them until
that's a really good point.
The last week and a half, 2 weeks wasn't until that late in the year when they were really comfortably in. They were on the bubble for most of the season, then they really ramped it up at the end. But yeah, I wouldn't go as far as to predict a Frozen Four either. I think it's so hard to get there, and I won't say the last 3 years have been an anomaly by any means, but predicting a Frozen Four, only 4 out of all the hockey teams in the country go there. And even though Michigan's done it the last 3 years, it's so hard. And you got to beat 2 of the best teams in the country just to get there. And then you got to win 2 more games to win the national championship.
Yeah. It's some of the best playoffs there is in college sports because, like you said, to get to that level is hard enough as it is. But if you're Michigan, Minnesota's always there. Sparty, like I said, has national championship aspirations this year. Wisconsin, and then you still get into the Boston schools and the Denvers and the Quinnipiacs, your usual suspects, if you will. But man, you've got some tough opponents right here in your backyard. If you're Michigan. So
yeah,
I forgot that was like every day it was like checking that push to the end to get in for Michigan, and then they do get in, and then obviously go on. Anytime you can devastate Sparty, right? Yeah, so good. But look, it's still optimism around the program. They're going to be fun to watch this year for sure. There's still a bunch of dudes already drafted to the NHL on that team, and there's dudes that will be drafted, and lots of young talent coming in. But I think that's the best way to put it. Is it's a young, talented team that's just going to have to figure out a way to get cohesive. I think kind of similar to basketball, we might see, maybe not the 1 or 2 major goal scorers. You can see a lot of dudes contribute. And if you are an old man like me, seeing LaPointe and Draper out there is, oh my, dude. Martin. I didn't even talk about that with basketball too. So hockey's got Martin LaPointe and obviously is Keenan, right? Or Kieran?
Yeah.
Draper's son. Basketball, I wish I would have brought this up before. You've got the former head coach, his son, Jace, is still on the team. The current head coach has a son on the team. Yeah. And then Howard Isley Jr., the former assistant coach, his son is on the team. Scottie Pippen's son is on the team. It's not a good time to be old. Tell you what, all these names in my face. But Brock's not going to have time to rest, man. Always on the road, hitting up the football games for us, and then lots of hockey and basketball you're going to be watching as well. So your coverage has been awesome on these 2 sports the last few years. So I'm really looking forward to it. And look, we are going to be bringing a lot more premium content around basketball this season as well. We've done a lot of good things with football for a while in terms of the analytics and the video clips and some different premium regular features we've had on the site. We're going to be bringing that to basketball this year and really try to enhance our coverage there for you guys. So again, if you're not a subscriber already, please give us a shot. Michigan.rivals.com. If you go to sign up and you want to take advantage of the promo code, it's Blue30, gets you the first month free. Otherwise, as always, hail to the podcast, the loyal viewers, the same folks that are here start to end. We love you guys so much. Thank you for your comments and being a part of the conversation. If you're watching this on playback or listening on Spotify, and you want to be a part of the conversation, make sure you go to YouTube, like, subscribe, notification bell, so you know when we go live Sundays at 7 with Hail to the Podcast and Dennis's show, Good Afternoon Michigan Football, soon to be Good Afternoon Michigan Basketball as well. His live show, very interactive with fans, lots of comments, lots of questions, and his post-game coverage as well. Derek getting it late. Basketball coverage courtesy of Circuit City. There's the reference. It is what it is. Had to get a Circuit City in there, and now all has been completed. So, all right, we will be back next week talking, I don't know, Brock, a monumental win over Illinois, a program-defining loss. I mean, who knows? It's going to be an anxious week, though. So, again, make sure you're over at michigan.rivals.com in the den as we cover. There's going to be a lot of injury talk this week as well, and then some intel around Jack Tuttle's first full game week as starting quarterback and maybe what that means for this team moving forward. So, anyway, thanks as always, and we'll see you soon next week. Hail to the podcast.